the floor.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Muchas gracias por
Good afternoon. Thank you for participating in this last plenary meeting today. When we suggested this topic, we were thinking of discussing what is happening in different areas so that the specialists can tell us what they are doing in their own areas, and based on that, learning what we can do when weeds go to other areas. So we will start from the south and then go to the north. Good afternoon. Thank you, Aprecid, for your invitation. I'd also like to thank you for being here with us. First of all, you may see this picture. One of the coolest things today is service crop. You can see there's ryegrass, crucifers, maybe some veg, but that's not the case. These are weeds. So the same plants may be weeds or not, depending on the situation. What you can see here is radishes, ryegrass. I'm going to show the layout of weeds. You can see that here we're talking about Brassica rapa resistant to glyphosate and ALS. You can see how things have changed from 2013, 2015, 2017, especially in southeast of Buenos Aires. And Brassica rapa resistant to 2,4-D, which may be found in some areas there in blue. We should differentiate resistance and tolerance. Sometimes we say this is resistant to 2,4-D, and it is not. Then we have ryegrass. This is a weed that has already disseminated in several areas. I guess most of you are familiar with it, and since 2013, it's been present almost all over the country. Resistant to glyphosate, and here you can see resistant to ALS, and you can also see crossed resistance with the different herbicides. We call here Nabolsa. We've always had Brassica rapa, which is radish, the radish we had always studied. But it turns out that at some point in time in other countries, glyphosate-resistant rapeseed was planted. The same soybean gene was inserted into it, and it is rapeseed resistant to glyphosate. We studied that in Argentina, and we started to see that it could be crossed with the native crucifers, but unfortunately, in a way, that gene got into nature, and today in our area we have radish, which is Brassica rapa, where recipe is Brassica napus, with a gene that is resistant to glyphosate. We are lucky because that weed is also resistant to ALS. We have 5 families of ALS, and it's also resistant to those 5 families. So unfortunately, it is difficult to control this weed in our area. And we will see the distribution later on. This is the type of resistance. Glyphosate and ALS is monogenic resistance. 2,4-D is metabolic resistant. There are some technical issues here. I do not have time to get into that, but I can answer questions if there are questions. I'm not a specialist in weeds, but I provide advice. I'm learning continuously. These weeds are born all year long, and they are dispersed through trucks. You will first see them on the trenches and then inside the plots. And I'm pretty sure it's already reaching the Salado Bay Basin and Carmen de Areco area. Ryegrass is a totally different situation. You see resistance farm after farm. These are metabolic resistance. It grows in fall. And you find resistance in the different fields. Sometimes it comes from the outside, but it depends on what you do and what your neighbors do. This is our area. Here there is a high ryegrass population plus Nabolsa, and here you have another situation. This is a leased farm that was in this condition. Yield losses because of ryegrass in wheat. In Chile, these are some tests. 3,000 kilos per hectare. This is what you have when you have a witness, because you pulled weeds out manually or because you used herbicides, $200 to $300 per hectare. And in the untreated plot, 1,400 kilos per hectare. You may say that's not your yield in your area. In southeast of Buenos Aires, 4,900 kilos per hectare when there is no ryegrass, and 2,100 when there is ryegrass. It's also high in southwest of Buenos Aires. 3,000 kilos versus 800 kilos. This is a competition level. This is information from Chile sent to me by my friends over and by another friend. And very recently I got this picture from Córdoba for you to see how this is moving forward. And what is missing here? Monitoring. That's one of the main issues that has to be considered. This is a ryegrass plant. And this type of weed already has 10 tillers. With 10 tillers, you need a double strike. It's this size. The plant is this size. It's very difficult to kill this plant. This is when you use chemical control. For the south of Buenos Aires, this is a summary of what is being done, how the different technologies are adopted today and how they will be adopted in 2025. You can see rotations. In 2019, rotation chosen to control a certain weed is 10% in the case of ryegrass and 10% in the case of Nabolsa. And we hope this will not change too much for 2025. In our area, things are not that bad. We have an area where we can rotate culture quite a lot. Rotation of crop services, I put 1% just to put something. There is very little that's being done. It's only experimental. And we hope that we will reach 5% by 2025. Herbicides with different modes of actions. 20, 50, there are 8.5 modes of actions. One that works not very well, so there is a high rotation possibility. And 11 for this case, 11 modes of action. Less residual herbicides being used as compared to other areas. Double strike herbicides, ryegrass, 50% of the cases this is being done, and 10% in the case of Nabolsa. We hope this will grow as well. It is very difficult to estimate these figures, but this is just for you to have an idea. Tillage, 20% and 10%. We hope those percentages will go down, and we really expect this to happen. Equipment cleaning, very little is done. We are working on this. We hope the figures will double, even though they're very low. Selective application, there are 12 types of selective application, and we hope we will go from 0 to 30% by 2025. This is really wishful thinking. Seed destructor. I think nobody's doing this in Argentina. It's a wonderful technology to fight weeds. How many dollars per hectare does this cost us? With ryegrass, we spend very little in herbicide. Well-managed farms spend $50 per hectare a year during the whole crop culture. When you have ryegrass, you go up to 120 in 2025 and 60 in La Bolsa with this scheme. Well, this is plowing or tilling. This is what the field looks like. In this case, you just have to go and pluck them out. You can see there is just a piece of stem, and you can see how the plant grows just based on that little stem. Ryegrass is in love with the disc. You can do everything you want, turn the soil around, and the ryegrass will be happy. In Chile, 80% of ryegrass regrows. So what is the solution? If you've worked wrongly for many years, in one day you wake up wanting to destroy the soil, then this is the solution. It is not a recommendation. If you have worked the wrong way for many years, and one day you decide to destroy the soil, then this is the solution. And it works. This is ryegrass in Chile. You can see what the result is. When ryegrass is like this, it doesn't work any longer. These are some situations we see in the farms. I've not taken any picture of clean plots. You can see there are many weeds in our area. Radish is resistant to ALS, not glyphosate, and it's really all over. This lot has not been well managed. This is why we have this ryegrass population. Eventually, it was controlled. You can see that barley looks uglier where there was ryegrass. And finally, I'd like to say two things. One is that if you take a look at this wonderful landscape that has never been touched by human beings. And I think this is a concept that we should be clear about. Here, there are some plants which are resistant to glyphosate. Why am I saying this? Because very frequently when we go to control ryegrass in a farm, we tell the farmer to use a certain herbicide. These are not prescriptions, these are just examples. Use a graminicide and glyphosate in those spots or headland with ryegrass. And the farmer says, but that ryegrass is not resistant to glyphosate. And I tell them, it is. You have a low proportion of plant. Those who specialize in weeds very frequently say that the population is resistant when there is over 20% of resistant plants. In practice, we should never reach 20%. So what we have to do is, every time we spray, we have to apply two modes of actions that will control that weed. And that is very important. You should never forget this. This has already happened in Coronel Dorrego and in Chile. When you apply glyphosate, ryegrass becomes resistant. Then oxyfox, it became resistant to that. They did paraquat, and it became resistant to that because they are selecting resistant plants and they're giving them exactly what they need. As a bottom line message or takeaway message, I'd like to be more optimistic. These weeds will get to you. That's not the optimistic message. You will see them. What we're seeing is that once it is in an area, the trucks will go from there to Rosario. So today, this is being spread out by the trucks. But we always see that the future is black. But the fact that all of us are here yesterday, there were 5,000 people. That's a strong message. There are lots of technologies, rotation, service crops to combat this type of problems. So we shouldn't go to the problem but to the system. This presentation was just to raise awareness. Thank you.
Hola. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Martin, for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm going to talk about weeds in the core area. In our area, we have ryegrass, coniza, Cardus acanthoides with potential resistance to 2,4-D. And then in spring, there is very little time for my presentation, so I'm going to focus on amaranthus and annual grasses, Alucina indica and Enetocloa. And we're going to focus on that from a chemical and cultural point of view. As to chemical management, I'll start talking about rotations. There are some things we take for granted, which are crop rotation, for example. So we usually do wheat, soybean, corn, soybean. I'm going to focus on corn and soybean. And what do you have to do? What do? We identify the target wheat, amaranthus, and grass in summer. So we have to identify our star product, the one that will have the best performance in weed control. And from then backwards, we do the active principle sequence for emerging weeds. If we know that here, for example, in pre-emergence, HPPD is working well, then we're going to do the whole sequence backwards. You can see the different steps, different modes of action. So if we're going to use that family as pre-emerging in pre-planting, we have to go to the large fallow and consider all the active principles so that there will be an overlapping in time. We have to mix modes of action, as Agustin said, without using too much cover crop, because otherwise it will not get to the soil. And the first rainfall after the spring is very important because it incorporates the emergent into the soil. So what is done in my area? Long furrow with atrazine, because atrazine has many years, and there is already microbial flora in the soil, so we cannot ask too much. So we can use long fallow, but recently we have had winters with some rainfall, so when winter comes back, we already have amaranthus, so we use short fallows, 20-25 days before planting. So PDS, diclofenac, pendimethalin, or if we use an ALS because we have ryegrass, we apply atrazine here, but we have to reach our product without having had any overlapping of active principles. We've tried all the active principles. There's not too much time to get deeper into any of them. There are some subtle differences, but for we can use HPPD. We can use HPPD for pigweed. There are some differences for the different species, and some of the weeds where chloracethamide work very well are these ones here, but we have to choose the right partner. Flumoxacin works very well as well, but if we are using if we're going to use PPO mode of action, we're also going to use that on corn. So the idea is to use another active principles, knowing that there's already been PPO resistance in other areas. As to post-emerging, what we use are HPPD. HPPD. These ones here. As every post-emergence application, it depends on the size of the weed, on the ecophysiological condition, and application and spraying quality. All these products work better with atrazine, but as you may see, these are pictures of an assay where you can see the different sizes. You should also think that palmeri grows more than 3 centimeters a day. So if you let a week go by, you can imagine how tall that will change and how the condition may change. It's even worse in the case of grass. Here we use HPPD and ALS. You can see Echinocloa and Digitaria. They are part of our annual grasses. You see those weeds that have been controlled, they were dry, and then you see that regrowth. As to post-emerging, 2,4-D is still being used. It is no longer controlling pigweed. And the impact on corn is amazing. We've measured different tests, and you can see the green snap. You see formulations which have not been registered for corn, but we've added them because very frequently farmers use what they are given for fallow, and they also use it for corn. And you can see that there is even up to 60% of gill snap. You can see root thickening, green snap, onion leaves, far from 2,4-D. As to soybean, it's the same criteria. I'm going to position my target wheat, pigweed, annual grasses here. So what is my star product? PPO. So how do I do all the sequence backwards? Using the active principles. So usually you start long fallow with ALS, then you go to short fallow. In the past, we tried to get to pre-emerging no matter how, but it was not possible, so we use another active principle, atrazine, diclofenac, pendimethalin, and then we go with PPO to the planting time. We can also change the strategy if you decide to use ALS because there is a lot of grass. And there are other alternatives with non-STS soybean. If you decide to use ALS here, obviously here you're going to use something different, maybe atrazine. As to post-emergence treatment in red, that's worse than what I said when I talked about corn. Active principles are vinazoline, lactofen, but it depends a lot on wheat size, application conditions, and quality. When the conditions are not good, the crop suffers quite a lot. If the conditions are right, the crop will recover very quickly and I will have a good weed control. But otherwise, the results are erratic. We tried pre-emergence in different conditions, lots of pressure. We've measured everything that was available in the market, and mostly amaranthus. We use PPO and pyrothiosulmon and pyracines. For every weed, same thing. You have the grass complex, same recommendation. ALS works very well. Chloracethamide works very well for leucine. This has also been published, and I can send it to you if you want. So you have to decide from the end backwards, what is it? Is it amaranthus? Is it grass? Well, if there's lots of amaranthus, PPO and tracines, that's specific. Then chloracethamide. And if it's grass, I can use a carotenoid, or I can go to ALS, but backwards, so that taking into account that there should not be any overlapping of active principles. Selective spraying. We started doing this with EcoSnicker. We did some tests in fallow and rotation. And what did we see? That we can save. This is total coverage with the EcoSniper, and we were able to reduce the environmental impact. On average, that's 32%. We achieved a 34% reduction in environmental impact and 29% in cost. This is herbicides, not the spraying cost. But you can save 29% in product costs. Now, what happens if we just stick to chemical control? Well, in the US, the title of the presentation is "Tell me something that will help other areas." Well, this has already happened in the US, and there was tribal resistance to 3, 4, even 5 active principles. You can see PPO, HPPD, everything we have been using so far. There's already resistance there. So we will be hit if we don't do something different. We will be hit, as Agustin said. So what can we do? Well, this is where service crops come on stage. We can see that they are helping us to control weeds, implantation, inoculation in the case of vetch, and you can see that when there is space, wheat will grow. So what do we want to achieve with rotation? Vetch here, which contributes nitrogen in between corn and soybean, rye with very good conditions, and vetch contributes nitrogen, which in these high yield environments is very good because there is some nitrogen deficit here. We want to move service crops earlier. This is a test carried out this year. In farms, you can see broadcast service crops, trying to see whether we can move things 1 month earlier. This is rye, soybean on corn. This has no pre-emergence application. Last year we did rye. We're concerned because it was a dry year, and you can see that rye never closed the row, and there was no weed. And rye is quite a cheap service crop. This is another test where you can see early corn with and without cover crop. This is late corn, same test, early and late corn. You can see it's clean at the end of the cycle. In some cases, we do use service crop because wheat pressure is big in winter, so I'd rather have good service crop. This is a test this year. This is the farm of one of the members of our regional center, and you can see everything we have been testing. Diflufenican and flumexulcam, low toxicity, and help us stop the weeds so that the crop can grow. And on the right, you can see phytotoxicity on the crops. And this is aerial image. And this is cost. Here I'm comparing rotation in my regional department, corn, chemical fallow, cover crop with corn but chemically dried, cover crop, corn but rolled dried, soybean with an overpass, cover crop, soybean but rolled, and then wheat soybean and wheat soybean with overpass. So what have we estimated the cost of herbicides in different strategies? As I add service crop and rolled, it goes down. And when I add the cost of service crops, I'm spending $25 more. But you can see how it goes down. That's the difference between expenditure and investment. But you can see to what extent the environmental index goes down. Can the system be more complex for weeds? Because we know that more complex systems compete in a better way. This is a double-purpose weed with no herbicide. You can see the cows grazing over there. We're going back to old things. You can see broadcast, ryegrass, and corn. Broadcast oat in rye, in corn, and broadcast oat in soybean. Finally, and when you say this, many times people tell you this is impossible. Weeds don't care who's going to win the soccer game on Sunday. They just want to grow in Argentina. Apparently, everything is impossible. So I remembered a story I once read, and Santiago Kovadlov told this story in a much nicer way than I'm going to do, but a letter was sent by Pueyrredón to Mr. San Martin when he was about to cross the Andes chain. San Martin had requested lots of things, and he said, General San Martin, I'm sending you the horses, uniforms, rifles. There was a whole list. And don't ask for anything else because what you want to do is impossible. San Martin received that letter, started to write back. There was no WhatsApp at the time. That was in 1800. And he said, General Pueyrredón, thank you very much for all your supplies, which I have received correctly. You may be right. What I want to do may be impossible, but it is essential that we do it. I think this is what we have to do with the weeds if we don't want them to move forward. Thank you very much.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por su participación.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here with us. We were asked to talk about perennial weeds, especially in the Bandera Farm area, that is southeast of the province of Santiago del Estero. And with this picture, I'd like to summarize one of the scenarios that led to the creation of this farm. A group of farmers got together to find solutions to a problem that had been growing and for which no solutions were being found. Here, we can see Gloris, Papaphorum. These are perennial weeds in our environment, and over the last few years, we have seen an exponential growth in Amaranthus hybridus, not only Amaranthus, but many other annual grasses, as my colleague has just said. So, the environments change year after year, and we are surprised by the growth of these species every day. My presentation will be focused on the different alternatives we developed in our farm, not so much the chemical alternatives. And in this case, Gomphrena perennis and Papaphorum crepitosum. Both are perennial weeds, highly tolerant to glyphosate, depending on whether they are in a vegetative state or where the plant comes from. It's different if it's seed or regrowth. In the case of Gomphrena, you can see what the distribution has been like over the last few years, center and north of the country, as you may see, and Papaphorum shares some saline and semi-dry environments. Our first step was to reach a diagnosis to establish which plots had a higher predominance. Same thing for Papaphorum capitosum, even though in the south you can see a higher concentration. This is due to its adaptation to rather saline soils. The first thing we started doing to learn about the weeds in our environment was to build emergence curves. We need to know our enemy to make a diagnosis, and we can see weekly emergence. In the case of Gomphrena perennis, it's always at the beginning of October. This is birth of seeds, while if it's regrowth, then you see that during the second or third week of September, when temperature goes up. Here you can see that during this birth period, we see most of the emergence, 2 months, 50, 60 days, depending on the year and the environmental conditions. In the case of Papaphorum capitosum, seeds emerge earlier, depending on the year. The species does not require humidity conditions, but it does require temperature conditions. This is what differentiates it from Gomphrena. It's also a perennial weed, and growth is focused on a wider period as compared to Gomphrena. What can this information help us to achieve? It can help us to understand what our intervention windows might be as a farmer to achieve the best control. In the case of Papaphorum, depending on its growth or seed, we see the vegetative period is longer. It's similar with Gomphrena. While if the weed grows, if it's regrowth, well, I can see that the number of days varies, and I can make a chemical intervention to avoid proliferation of species in the plot. As I've already said, this will define the control window. Grasses are different from oilseed, and spraying frequency varies. You can use the double strike, you may even use a third or a fourth spraying in the case of soybean or corn. And the use of residual herbicides is one of the most widely used tactics. I'm not going to talk too much about management because my colleagues have already mentioned this. Plot monitoring, action mode, rotation. But I'd like to point out that the use of residual herbicides for this species has always been an interesting alternative. This is what we have been doing to control weeds. aerial spraying. This year there was too much rainfall. We have added this cultural practice. We believe this is one of the best alternatives. There are stable production systems with these weed species which have been incorporated in the aerial planting method for years. Then harvest takes place whether it's soybean or corn. And here you can see that the crop is growing, triticale, rye, veg, anthesis before drying, and you can see that the crop is born free from weeds. So we can achieve up to 90% control in those species. You see a significant suppression of natural birth with rye. And these are the results we have been achieving in terms of aerial biomass, between 3,000 and 5,000 kilos every year. You can see differences between soybean and corn because of harvesting dates and intercepting radiation, which favors growth. And we can also see a chemical and cultural supplementation that helps us achieve control. And very frequently the question is whether service crops, well, we know that service crops control seed emergence very well, as well as weeds coming from seed, but people are not sure as to whether you can really control perennial species. And this is a picture of veg 30 days after drying, and you can see the suppression in the case of Papaphorum. So, can you use service crops to control perennial weeds? The answer is yes. It's quite clear. As to Papaphorum capitopsum, this is an example of our farm that we always use. This is typical emergence curve in black. So when I use a service crop, what I'm achieving in the red line is through that coverage I'm competing with the weeds and with stubble so to suppress birth. And when I add a chemical intervention, I am able to concentrate birth in a certain time, and consequently I am optimizing the efficiency in the use of resources. Finally, we use integrated weed management. One of the species that adjust to our area are veg and Menilotus. They both have their advantages and they adjust to the different environments. Secondly, as way of example, I have included some active principles that we're using to control different species, and we have these perennial species but also others, such as Amaranthus and annual grasses. Short chemical fallow before planting corn, service crop, in flowering 60 days after flowering stage. In the case of corn, R5, R6, different types of species. So we already have that service crop that is growing within the corn species. And then we provide this chemical supplement during the tiller phase, and then we have a second chemical control with some active principles. And when we talk about perennial wheat, we have to mention selective spraying. I know it's obvious, it is widely used. There are some cases where 20% of saving has been achieved in 0 year in the first year. on average, 35, 36% saving in the first and second year, and even 80% saving in the third year. So consequently, we can reduce the number of weeds and achieve better control. Thank you very much.
Bueno, gracias.
Well, thank you. There is some time for questions.
Así que, bueno, vamos a empezar con la primera.
We can start with the first question. Does rainfall have an impact on ryegrass, considering that there is a high water demand? Can this be the reason why it is not reaching the north of Córdoba? Well, first of all, ryegrass, of course, depends on conditions and on the systems we may have. At some point in time, I forgot to mention the mixed systems that were mentioned by José. Ryegrass as winter cover, and of course that's one of the ways to follow. As to humidity, that's not a problem in our case. It's more related to rotation. Here, there are farmers from the Dorrego area. Dorrego is a very dry area, but with a lot of monocrop. By monocrop, you think it may be soybean, but it is not. Where there is fine winter crop, ryegrass moves much faster, so it doesn't depend so much on soil humidity, but on other management factors. What happens in your area, in Córdoba? Where are you seeing this? All over. The Marco Juárez area, there's been a quick progress from the time you have a plant until it is disseminated all over. Well, that happens very quickly. It grows very quickly. In the southeast and south of Santa Fe, there is quite a lot of ryegrass. As regards selective spraying, which are the restricting factors? Why that explain why it does not evolve so much as in the north? We're working hard. We think it's a mental barrier, it's a mindset barrier, especially in some conditions. There are some specific conditions. The weed issue has increased over the last, or has become worse over the last few years, and we have to think of selective application. The mental barrier is to say it's expensive, so we will not be able to afford it. It's true that these are expensive equipment, but it is very easy to estimate how fast you can amortize it. In the province of Buenos Aires, there are 4 selective application equipments operating, and I think it's more of a mental barrier. And we think this will progress very quickly. In our area, southeast of Buenos Aires and the Salado Basin, River Basin, we have made 15 estimations, and the result is that all farms, 3,200 hectares on average, you will recover the cost in 1 year and a half. It depends on rotation of the weeds, but I think it's a rather mental barrier, but this is changing very quickly. I think it will eventually be implemented. As with everything, when it started, technology was expensive. Initially, it was $7,000 a meter. Now it's $4,000. It will become cheaper, and it's true that there is a mental barrier, but we're now even thinking of systems with service crops. And you may say, well, but it will not be so profitable in that that case, but if you use it once a year, maybe you can get together with many other farmers and use it, but I think that eventually it will be used by everyone because there's also a social pressure to reduce the number of inputs, the amount of, or the volume of inputs we use. Well, there's another question.
Federico
Bedino from Corral de Bustos. José Luis, what can you say about chemical and cultural control of Cardus acanthoide in the southeast of Córdoba? Well, this is quite new. We have carried out some tests. Chlorpyralid works very well. A commercial brand with Finesse that works very well too. And we found some plots that were completely covered in ryegrass. We have also found that in the south. And chlorpyralin plus some others, well, it's easier with corn. It's simpler. In soybean, you have to be careful with the millimeters because of the restrictions with both products. But and with support of residual product, it works very well. Same thing with triazine. But we've also taken some farms that were absolutely infested, and in the past we would say, I'm not going to plant wheat in that farm, but we have done it, and we use double fertilization planters. You add urea and then you add that. If you go and kick the wheat, you can take it out quite easily. But you can see that effect. A good pre-emergence for Papaforum. Is there anyone that stands out? Well, these weeds can control quite easily with different residual herbicides, chlorocetamide or clomazone. These are some alternatives too. And in the case of corn, pyroxasulfone, that's a good alternative to control these grasses. Another question. Considering how different aerial planting is, what are the recommendations when you use that technique? Well, we always prioritize the timing, and by timing, the timing has been defined according to rainfall distribution in our area. Because of the way in which the seed is exposed on the soil surface, it is necessary to do this, and at the time of planting, at least some millimeters should be covered for that seed to be able to grow. And the phenologic stage of the crop, soybean, is different from corn. Well, there are no more questions, and we're running out of time, so thank you very much, everyone.